Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel and to another video. My name is Nikita. I'm a full-time therapist in Toronto, and on this channel we chat about diversity, inclusion of BIPOC, especially South Asian stories, both in the real life and as well as in fiction. So you can expect some book recommendations, book chats, as well as videos of my podcast called Brown People Problems. If you haven't already checked out the podcast, I will link it up here for you. The most recent episode, check it out. So for today's video, I wanted to talk about 3 BIPOC stories that I read in the month of February 2023. And these are some of the most famous books actually out right now that are quite trending. 2 of them were on Lily Singh's book club list as well. And one of them is just, I'm seeing it everywhere, very famous. So I decided to read them and wanted to share with you my true thoughts. Like, are they really as hyped up as they are? Is the hype real? Are they really as good as they're hyped up? And so this review is going to be spoiler free as always, and I'll share my thoughts with you here. So unfortunately, I don't have any physical copies of these books. I read them all on my Kobo. I borrowed them from my library, the ebooks, and I have the Kobo Libra 2. For those who don't know, Kobo is like the Canadian Kindle. It's like the Kindle alternative in Canada, and it's just a really, really lovely e-reader. As you can see, I have the one in black, and it's been almost 3 years, 2.5 years now. It's going great. So if anyone's interested in checking this e-reader out, I'll link it down below as well. All right, so first up, I have Lily's book club pick, Well-Behaved Indian Women by Soumya Dave. I hope I pronounced her last name right, but this is a book I'm sure you've kind of seen in quite a lot of spaces. It's like a really famous book that's being talked about right now, and I believe Lily Singh really kind of helped get the word out, or at least for me. And prior to that, I hadn't seen this book anywhere else. So this book is set in modern day United States, and it follows a story of 3 women from 3 different generations, part of the same family. So you've got Simran, who's this young millennial brown woman, her mother Nandini, who's a physician, and the grandmother Mimi, who lives in India but still has a very strong kind of relationship with the both of them. So this book is really kind of described as a story of 3 women who are kind of struggling to pursue their own dreams and find their own space in life, and navigating all of that while working within like the rigidity of social norms, gender norms, cultural norms for brown women and a lot of other women of color. So it sounded really, really exciting to me, and it sounded really interesting. We've got 3 female protagonists, they're very imperfect protagonists, very complicated, and it sounded really interesting. The story starts off with Simran. She is in grad school studying to be a therapist, and she likes to write part-time. And the story sort of starts off with her and her book launch, and it really explores Simran's own sort of inner struggle with what does she really want to pursue for the rest of her life. Is psychology really making her happy, or does she want to continue writing? All the while, navigating her true feelings about her high school sweetheart, who she's been dating for years and years now, and you really kind of get to know their relationship dynamic as well. So the good thing, what I really like about this book is that there's a little bit of something for everyone. There is a romance element to it. There's some family drama. It's definitely what some people would describe as women's fiction, even though I don't love that term, because fiction is fiction, it's for everybody. So my thoughts about this book, I was very excited to get into it. The premise sounded lovely, very nice and complex family dynamics, intergenerational family perspective. I just absolutely love that. But I have to say, I was quite disappointed with this book, and I hate to say it. And now, just because I didn't enjoy it doesn't mean that no one else would enjoy it. So definitely do pick up the book and form your own opinion. But I was really excited going into this, and to be honest, it fell a little flat for me. I think I ended up giving this 3 stars on Goodreads, and I guess maybe my expectations were a little bit too high, but I found that the story was just quite dry in some places, and it was really like dragged out, especially towards the end. I think there were some parts of it that we could have done without. It definitely felt a little rambly, and if if I may say so, definitely like a little bit too dramatic at times. The one thing that I really appreciated about this book was it sort of jumps back a little bit in time as you hear the story of Nandini, who's Simran's mom, about her complicated past, and what her, not just her immigrant story, because she immigrated from India to the States with her husband, and then she had Simran, but what was her life before that in India as well. And that's one story that I feel like the author should have given us more of. You definitely get to learn a little bit about her complicated past, and there's a lot of like secrecy in the first quarter of the book that doesn't really kind of show face till a little bit later on. So it's good sort of suspense building in a way, which I really enjoyed. But like I said, after that, it just fell flat for me. The author definitely did a good job of touching on some really important topics, like Nandini being a female physician facing not just sexism in the workplace but also racism, and being treated differently than her male white counterparts in the hospital or in the clinic that she works at. But I felt that the author kind of just touched these topics very touch and go. I would have personally enjoyed a little bit more of a detailed narrative and more of an unpacking around this narrative. It was very much just like, oh, and then she, it was very much just like, oh, she had a racist experience. And it was very like textbook experiences, if that makes sense. A lot of these experiences weren't or didn't feel to me very nuanced. It was very much like, oh, Simran's having a hard time picking between what she wants to do. And these concepts that are actually so complex and so nuanced were offered to us in a very sort of simplistic way. There wasn't so much depth, I guess, that I was looking for. And to be honest, I had to like really drag my feet through to the end because I wanted to finish it off. And I personally didn't walk away with feeling super satisfied when I did. So sadly for me, it wasn't my favorite read. But definitely it's really famous, so check it out, make your own opinion. Okay, next up I have another pick from Lily's book club, and this one is called At Least You Have Your Health by Maddie Sinha. When I read the premise for this book, it sounded interesting, but I wasn't really burning to pick it up, and I am so glad I did. So right off the bat, I'm going to tell you, I gave this book like 4.5 stars out of 5 on Goodreads. It was just phenomenal, amazingly told, and after I read Well-Behaved Indian Women, I kind of did not have like much expectations going into it, and I don't know why I was comparing the two in my head, but I was just not ready for it, and I was very, very pleasantly surprised. So At Least You Have Your Health is a book about Dr. Maya Rao, who is a gynecologist in the US, and she is a mom, with like 3 kids. She's in an interracial marriage. And so you get like a glimpse of what that's like. And she's a daughter of immigrants, and she's a gynecologist doing really well for herself, but basically she's really, really busy, as you can imagine, with 3 kids and like a household to run and then like a career to maintain. But right in the beginning of the book, she has a disastrous experience with a patient, and that forces her to walk away from her job at the hospital in the gynecology clinic. And what really happens from there is quite fascinating. I really enjoyed the character development in this book, but Dr. Rao finds herself being offered a position at a boutique clinic. So she ends up working with a lot of these upper middle class, rich, white women in the neighborhood, and going to their house and offering them boutique medical services. But as she is participating in this job, and as she's kind of navigating this whole like life of like wealth and privilege, she starts to kind of idealize her boss, who is this white woman, Amelia, who runs this boutique medical service clinic. And you kind of see that nobody's life is as picture perfect as it seems. And it's really interesting as Maya finds herself encountering all of these alternative medical practices. She really finds herself like at a clash with her own scientific medical training, and how to now consolidate that with what her patients want, what her clients want, which is actually something totally different. And it was really, really interesting. It's I guess you could call this like a medical fiction, a women's fiction, and there's a bit of a mystery element too, which I really enjoyed, because Maya becomes so kind of enamored with Amelia and her boss and her kind of lifestyle that she starts to maybe want to aspire to some of that herself. And you come to this place in the book where you realize everyone has secrets. No one's life is as it seems, especially those with a lot of wealth and privilege. I love how the author Maddie Sinha told the story. I looked into Maddie Sinha after, and she's also a physician who lives and practices in New York. And so I kind of really appreciated just like a physician writing a fiction novel. And I thought the book was fast-paced, so there's no boring lulls. I was not actually bored at any point, and I finished this book in maybe 3 or 4 days when I was traveling. And it's very fast-paced. The story is quickly evolving, and you just see so many unique things happen in this book. So you see a woman kind of struggle with her own identity as a physician and a medical doctor, and what that looks like in the face of alternative medicine. You see the relationship of a brown female doctor with her relationship with her assistant, who is a Black woman, and just what that's like in terms of shared experiences of oppression and racism, but also like the differences that we have in our communities around the same oppressive experiences. So that was really interesting dynamic as well, and I really enjoyed their friendship element. I thought that was a really lovely part of the book. You also see a little bit of what motherhood looks like for her, and how maybe she doesn't always have things together, and what it's like for her to live life with her Norwegian husband. There was some parts of this book, some quotes that I just had to highlight and screenshot that did so well. So like from the well-behaved Indian women, I was expecting a lot more of that parents of children of immigrants. So like the perspective of the immigrant parents, right? And what it was like for them to make those choices. I didn't really get satisfied from what I was looking for. But in this, even though the story is about Dr. Maya Rao, it's not really so much about her family. There's a couple chapters in here where you get glimpses about her family, and how her family is, very middle class from India. They came and they ran a motel, and they kind of just stuck to what they knew, and there maybe wasn't a lot of space for them to grow. And there's a couple chapters from the perspective of her mother where she really talks about where this pressure to perform that immigrant parents put on kids comes from. What is it really about? And what are the well-meaning intentions behind it? But just the author did such a lovely job of being so succinct and so impactful with her words. Like, she really nicely articulated what it's like to be like a struggling immigrant and consciously put a lot of academic pressure on your kids and consciously deprive them of creative hobbies, while also coming from a really, really lovely, really loving and empathic place. So I really loved that. I really enjoyed the parts in the book where she really stood up to maybe some of the discrimination that she was facing, and she spoke up, and that felt very gratifying. I was kind of cheering for her as I was reading this. So I definitely loved Dr. Maya Rao. I think she's gotta be one of like my favorite brown female protagonists. And if there's a follow-up of this book, I would 100% read it. There's another book by the same author. It's called The White Coat Diaries, and I'm planning on picking that up soon too. So yeah, I thought this was a really, really great read. Totally worth the hype. I can see why this would belong in Lily's book club. Check it out if you haven't already. Okay, the next and the last book that I read by a BIPOC author in the month of February is Dating Dr. Dil by Nisha Sharma. Now, let me tell you, this book, I was not expecting this book to be what it was. This was my first Nisha Sharma book. I have not read anything by her, and this book is not on Lily Singh's book club list, but I've seen this everywhere. It's a romance book. I've seen this everywhere right now. It's everywhere on Book Talk, on BookTube, and I was like, I'll give it a shot. It seems nice, and I was not too emotionally invested. I did not expect much of it going into it. It felt like, it's just a rom-com, it's just a romance, whatever, how original could you get with it? And I just gotta say, some parts of this book, they were ridiculous. So, okay, I actually quite enjoyed this book. I know there's a lot of like debate about this like Charlie thing online, and yes, I thought that was ridiculous. I could have lived without that whole Charlie aspect of this book. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go read it, and if you know what I'm talking about, leave me a comment down below when I hear your thoughts. But I could have lived without the Charlie thing, but other than that, I think I gave this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. So it's focused around our female protagonist. Her name is Karina Mon. She's an attorney. She lives, I believe it's in Philadelphia or New York, one of those. I'm bad with my United States cities. She is basically this like attorney by day, but then she's this like DIY home reno kind of person by night. And she lives with her grandma, her dad, and her younger sister, who's a teacher turned YouTuber, I believe. So it's an interesting family dynamic. And basically she is a fixer-upper. She loves to fix things around her house. Her house holds like a lot of emotional value for her because it was her mom's before her mom died. And she basically wants to buy this house from her dad and live in it and make it her own and really see through the vision that her mom had for the house, which I thought was like a really beautiful way of kind of living out the relationship. And you also don't see many women, but also many brown women, being shown as these like home reno DIY experts. So I kind of really enjoyed that perspective. So that's how the story starts. And you have our male character, that's Dr. Prem Verma. He is a cardiologist and he has his own little talk show called Dr. Dil. Dil means heart, and his first name Prem means love, right? So it was a little bit cringe, but I rolled with it. And they seem to be like total opposites, where she wants a love marriage. She wants this like really beautiful, hopeless movie like romance. And he's someone who's convinced that love is just bad for your heart health and love does not exist. And in his talk show, he actually talks about how love and emotions create bad cardiac health and heart attacks. I thought that was hilarious. And obviously they meet, they fall in love, and the story unravels from there. And they're clearly polar opposites, and they both have different like vested interests. Karina needs to find someone to get married because her family's putting a lot of pressure on her, and they're only going to sell her the house if she's engaged by a certain amount of time. And he has his own vested interest in building his community center for the South Asian community that focuses on holistic health. So they have a lot going for themselves, and they have a lot of interest, and they still come together. And the story just is basically about them trying to figure out like this relationship or trying to be together and what that looks like. It was very fast-paced. It was quite funny. I really enjoyed the characters, but I was not ready. The sex scenes in this book. Now, if you don't like, I guess, spicy romance, you maybe want to stay away from this book. But there were some scenes in there that I had no idea going into this book that that's what it was going to include. But it was very explicit, very steamy, and I was not prepared for those. And they were still very, very well written. This whole book was quite well written, and it was just a breeze to get through, and there were lots of spaces where I was like laughing out loud. I'm not usually a romance reader. I typically find sometimes the whole genre of romance to be a little bit repetitive, redundant, a little bit cheesy and cringy. And there were definitely some things about this book and about Charlie, right, that were extremely cringy, and I definitely took off a star for that. But it was such a fun read, really unique characters. I had a lot of fun just looking at their like love story unpack. It was a perfect book to read for the month of February. If you haven't checked it out, I would highly recommend it. I would say this is like, some people really, really hate this book because this whole like Charlie thing like really takes over for them. It didn't take over the whole book for me. I still quite really enjoyed this book. Gave it a 4 stars. I think it's a fun one-time read, and I'm definitely going to pick other things up from Nisha Sharma. Definitely enjoying the stories that she's writing, because it seems like she really likes writing about like messy brown women and just like what it looks like, right, to be like a complicated person. And I really appreciate that, because I'm not the biggest fan of books where the protagonists are very sort of like clear-cut and clearly in opposition with the antagonist, which is the villain. And there's no clear cut who's right, who's wrong here. It's very, very complicated. And you know, you can kind of be the protagonist. You can be well-meaning, but you can still be selfish. You can want to be a good Indian daughter, but still be really rude and act out and rock the boat. And so I just love that we got to see these two kind of different parts of Karina, our main character, come through. So I definitely enjoy it. I would recommend it. It was quite funny. I had a good time. So that's it, everyone. Those were the 3 BIPOC books that I read in the month of February that are also really famous right now. Wanted to review them for you so you can decide if you want to go ahead and check them out. I would still recommend all 3 of them. Like I said so many times, please do not keep yourself from reading something because you see someone online not like it. Definitely form your own opinions. I also engage with like reviews on Goodreads very mindfully. I don't let someone tell me whether I should or should not pick up a book and how I should feel about it. So definitely check it out. I think all of these are worth a read. And if you like this video, don't forget to hit subscribe, like, and I'll see you in my next one.